Hebrews 11, verse 30 reads, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days." Joshua and the Israelites faced an insurmountable obstacle in the solid rock walls of the city of Jericho into the promised land. Under Joshua's leadership, they too walked through the waters as on dry land, just as God did with the Red Sea. God held back the waters of the Jordan River at full flood stage, and the people crossed over the Jordan on dry ground. God told them to take the land, and now the first city that stood in the way was the city of Jericho. Jericho was located on the eastern side of Canaan, right across the Jordan River. It was situated at one of the largest freshwater springs in the land. Jericho was a strategic and important city. The people of Israel could not afford to bypass or ignore the city in their conquest of Canaan. As long as Jericho remained in power, Israel would have no peace in the promised land. Besides, God had commanded them to take the city. But the problem they faced with the Jericho were the walls. The city was fortified with large, thick walls that provided safety and protection for the people from the enemy's attacks. Now, in Joshua's time, there were basically only 5 ways you could conquer a walled city like Jericho. 1. You could tunnel underneath the walls if you have the time, the patience, and the right equipment. 2. You could go over the walls with ladders if you get past the fighters on the wall above. 3. You could break through the walls with heavy artillery. 4. You could lay siege to the city. 5. Or you could resort to some sort of trickery. The Israelites were not equipped to do any of these. They had just arrived in the land after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, so the walls were an insurmountable obstacle for the people of Israel. So, what do you do when you face an insurmountable obstacle like Jericho wall? You exercise faith by trusting God's deliverance. First of all, remember that God can remove any obstacle, no matter how big. The walls of Jericho were a huge obstacle for the Israelites, but the walls were no problem for God who created the universe. When we face a huge obstacle in life, the reason we sometimes panic is because we look at the obstacle in relation to ourselves rather than in relation to God. And if the obstacle is bigger than we can handle, if we do not have sufficient resources to deal with it, then we're going to get discouraged and lose hope. God told Joshua and his people, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with the king and its fighting men." Joshua 6:2. They believed God's word and they acted on it. That is faith, and faith can move mountains. Jesus said, "What is impossible with men is possible with God." Luke 18:27. So remember, don't look at the size of the obstacle, look to the Lord and the size of his strength. God can remove any obstacle, no matter how big. Do you have faith to believe that? Be blessed.